I would probably be sitting down on the farm milking goats right now. I was always the healthy one in our relationship because when we got married, Benny was on dialysis. I really appreciate you and I appreciate your ministry. I don't think you know how much.
Welcome, everybody. This is Bill Sparks from Gilead Ministries. I'm looking forward tonight to a conversation I've been trying to have for a little bit of time because of schedules. We cannot seem to pass each other's schedule and be able to catch up, but finally we've been able to do that. And so first off, just thanks for taking time, Tammy. I appreciate it very much.
God has given me such an amazing life. He started doing street meetings. He started went to Rikers Island on a regular basis. He founded United Street and Prison Revival Ministries. He was in Greenhaven. He was in some of the harder prisons trying to reach other people with that love that he found. Meanwhile, back in Anderson, Indiana, I was a student at Anderson University, and I had gone through TRIES in multiple different countries and was signed up to do TRIES, which was a student summer program, sort of like the Peace Corps kind of thing. And I was signed up to work at this inner city mission in the Hispanic neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. I would be there all summer usually there were a group of 5 of us. At the last minute, everyone else canceled. They were going to cancel the trip. I said, I was going to get a little bit of money for it, but I also was going to get enough internship credits to be able to graduate a semester early. So they sent me by myself. I was from a rural area in Southern Illinois. I lived with, the students normally lived in the mission, but because I was by myself, they didn't feel it was safe. So I stayed with Sister Patty, she and her family were originally from Alabama. She had a personality bigger than life. But I would walk from the Black neighborhood 10 blocks to the Hispanic neighborhood. And New York City blocks are long. And I attracted attention. And so the men were following me there and following me back to the apartment at night. She had bars on the windows, but they'd taken the fans and the air conditioning. So the men were pecking on the bars at night, trying to get me to come out. So they decided I needed a bodyguard. And they had this young street hoodlum who had just given his life to the Lord. And when I say he was rough, he was rough. Now, you can't say these things. You can't do these things. He had a car, and we came out of the mission one day, and the kids were standing on it, and he was going to kill the kids. He was going to kill their parents. No, you're a Christian now. You can't kill people. He bodyguarded me for almost 40 years. I came back and finished my last semester of school. And then we got married the following August. And my goal was to go back to school. But then when we got married, he came here and he started going to India. Well, he had to get his GED first because he had dropped out of school. After he got his GED, he started going to Indiana Wesleyan adult education program. Then, because of all of the other health issues, in 2011, he went through his first round of chemo. And I had never heard of the Gilead Ministries at that point in time. And one day, this woman pulled up in our driveway with a goodie bag of things. And she said, I'm from Gilead Ministries. And then, Benny said, oh, that's my buddy Bill. Then in 2019, he got pneumonia and had it sort of caused some health complications. But again, he kept bouncing back. Then in around Christmas of 2021, he got sick and ended up in intensive care and on life support for a couple of weeks. And this time, he didn't bounce back. The comfort in all of that is that I know where he is. Yeah. And I know healthy.
Yep.
Shortly, within a few weeks, a couple months after he passed, I started getting sick. And I ended up being diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate Gilead and Bill for all of the text and the support that I was given. And that one of the hardest things, I think, since he passed was quiet. How quiet it's been. But the I've heard many people talk about the fog of grief. And I've heard many people talk about chemo fog. Well, I had both going on at the same time in 2022. Wow, yeah. It was, sometimes I didn't know if I was coming or going. Someone posted on Facebook an image of Christ just carrying this person who's just like a child, just laying across his arms. And so many times that's how I had to, you just don't have this, you're sick and you're grieving, and sometimes you just don't have the energy to pray, but you know that God's got it. And you know that for me, knowing that other people were praying for me, mm-hmm. and every now and then I would get texts from you, that really is an encouragement. And everybody says, well, he's in a better place. Well, you know that, but here you still miss them. One of the things that everyone had said was because he had had a kidney transplant, we wouldn't be able to, because his kidneys had failed, we wouldn't be able to have a child. And in 1986, we had a daughter. She is completely healthy. She graduated from college. Has her own career, and God blessed us through that. And 4 months before Benny passed, she gave us our grandson. So he has been my little sunshine, and in some ways, he is so much like Benny. Had it not been for God, and putting Benny in my life, I never would have been able to experience those. So God has just looking back over how God, when I was in high school in 1979 in Southern Illinois, I was praying for a husband. In 1979, Good Friday, God was delivering him from the streets. Mm. God brought me to Anderson University. I came to school here because the campus was small and I liked the flowering trees in the spring. But God orchestrated all of that. God sent me by myself to New York and connected me with someone that I never in a million years would have thought that I would have been connected to. He and Benny we were so opposites in so many ways, but we complemented each other in so many ways. And when Benny was getting sicker, I guess I was starting to develop health problems, but I didn't know it. He said, it's because I'd have to get up and leave the table. And he said, something wrong with me. I said, I think I'm just getting an ulcer. And then after he passed and I started having this abdominal pain started getting worse, people said, well, it's probably just emotion. And I said, well, yeah, you're probably right. Because I didn't know what it was to be sick. I'd never met my deductible for our health insurance. I was always the healthy one in our relationship because when we got married, Benny was on dialysis and I was not used to having health problems. 3 months after he passed, I happened to be staying at her house. I was going to be babysitting our grandson and I started getting so sick. And somebody else said, well, again, maybe you're connecting being at her house with him being sick. Okay, well, maybe. So I didn't go to the hospital. Then 2 weeks later, I was at her house again, and I got so sick. And so they ended up taking me to the emergency room. And that's when the emergency room said, well, there's something there. We're not saying it's cancer, but you need to follow up. And then it was. But it was just because if I had had symptoms, I wasn't recognizing them because of everything else that was going on in my life.
Yeah. Yep.
And going through that, it felt like I was going through it all alone because Benny was not there. Even though I knew I had, my daughter was there, my sisters came up, I had friends who came up, that all my friends and my sisters and my daughter took turn taking me to the surgeries and the chemo and all of that. The doctor would ask, how are you doing? And I'd start talking about Benny, and they were asking about me, but that was still, it was so close together.
Yep.
That I wasn't able, it was all just sort of blurring together in my mind.
Yep.
That was the challenge, was getting my mind straight. And I think it was in my opinion, the grief was the hardest thing. It was harder to deal with than the sickness. I will say this, if you have someone in your life that's going through grief, the things that didn't help were people giving platitudes. And people saying, if you need anything, call me. My brain wasn't there. I didn't know what I needed. But it was the friends who came and just brought their coffee and sat with me. The next door neighbor, man, is 80 years old, and he has been mowing my yard ever since. It's those kinds of things. People just, or the other neighbors that just, even though the chemo made me so sick, I could hardly eat, but they would bring me food. Just doing and not asking, or just being there.
Yeah.
I found that those things or even just a text saying I'm thinking of you, just to know that you're not going through it by yourself. I would say, obviously, everybody goes through grief differently. I found that people have said, it gets better over time. I don't, for me, it's not necessarily that. It's you learn how to live differently. You learn how to live in this new reality. At least for me, it's all of a sudden your everything you knew is turned upside down. Even if I was always the one who handled all the detail work, I handled all of the, the bills and all of that kind of stuff. So it wasn't for me. Like, I know some people who their husbands die and they've never had to deal with any of that. I can't imagine what that would be like for them. But it's this trying to learn how to navigate life by yourself. And again, I know I'm not by myself, but right. You are. That's I think been the most challenging thing. Time does help with the fog. Benny passed in 22. I was sick through through December of 22. It took me through 23 to be able to just think straight. I'm still not sure I can, but I think maybe some of that chemo has affected my. Could just be that I'm old too, trying to remember things, but it's just a process. But there's a Willie Nelson song that says it's not something you get over, it's something you get through, and it's true. That is so much what it is. You just learn how to navigate this new reality. There's not a minute of every day, of any day, that I ever don't think about it. But also now it is a gratitude to God for putting us together and putting him in my life. because had he not, my life would have been so totally different. And even through everything, knowing that God doesn't keep you from the storms, but he's your anchor in the storms. That when you don't have the clarity or the wherewithal to even know what to do next, if you can just collapse into God and know that God's got it, that's what has been my strength, is just knowing I don't have to have it. God's got it.